Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Danny, dude, how's it going, man?
My man Matt, my Food Startups brother, things are going great. It's been a busy week. I've been making some progress on some new designs for my company. On the other hand, some things aren't going so great, but that's kind of the nature of food startups, huh?
Yeah, man, I've been knocked down a few times just today, man. It's only Tuesday, but as you said, it comes with the territory, and you just gotta keep getting better and keep going through these types of adversities.
Excellent. So, Matt, let me ask you a question. What do you do when you've been knocked down? Do you eat some ice cream and watch TV? Do you eat some superfoods and get on a treadmill? How do you deal?
Well, let's see. Sometimes I'll just walk around for a little bit. Sometimes I'll call you or call someone and just talk about the situation. Sometimes I'll, play sports with my dog. I'll take him out to play basketball or soccer. Those are the main things that I usually do. And sometimes I might the worst times, I'll be honest, man, I'll just sit there and just stew.
Ooh, yeah. Actually, that happened to me yesterday. And it was really bad news bears because I was at my girlfriend's house and her father was having a company dinner for his company. And I just got really upset. And I didn't say a word for 30 minutes when we were having a sort of Colombian style family meals. It wasn't so good, man. And I totally feel you. And I can imagine in Bogota, it's even worse than Medellin. You can always go out in Medellin, and unless it's raining, you can have a good old time walking around in the sun.
Well, believe it or not, Danny, actually this past weekend, we had 2 straight sunny days on Saturday and Sunday.
Wow. Incredible. So I guess Medellin I would call a little bit like LA as far as the weather goes. And Bogota is more like San Fran, right?
Or even Seattle.
So folks from the Northwest would be pretty at home perhaps in Bogota, but folks from LA wouldn't want to step into Bogota and be there for more than one day, huh?
It can happen, and sometimes because of the altitude, we're at just under 8,000 feet. I used to live here in this guest house, and these dudes from Ireland, this one guy, he just could not handle the altitude. He got nosebleeds and stuff, and he had to end up leaving and head out to the coast.
Yeah, man, that's really tough. I'm pretty proud of the fact that I can go on a run in high altitudes, and I have this image of Danny with this heart that's 40% bigger than everyone else's heart in the States because of the fact that I live in high altitude. But you live in higher altitude than me, man. So I guess I'm beat.
I have mixed feelings about it because on one hand, you don't get as much oxygen. And as far as I understand, you don't absorb as much food that you eat. But on the other hand, I remember I went to Texas. I went to Houston a few years ago and I was in decent shape, not great shape. I went running and I felt like a champ.
That's right, man. That's right. I can't wait because I've got a college reunion coming up in northern New Hampshire in June, and I'm going to try to show up all my friends when we go on a run. We've got these old dirt trails we would run in college together, and now I've been down in Colombia training for this race I had a few weeks ago, this 20K, and I know that that extra altitude gives me an extra bit of juice to lay easy on them for the first half of the race and then just leave them in the dust.
Well, what else? I guess in other news, Danny, next week is Alimentec. They say this about just about every feria, every food fair here, but apparently this is a biannual and the biggest Colombian food fair there is.
Interesting. Yeah. So Alimentec is this big food fair that Matt has been trying to convince me to go to. I've set sort of a, what would you call it? A moratorium on my number of visits to Bogota this year. I'm trying to keep it less than 4 because I was in Bogota probably for about 1 or 2 months last year. And so it's going to be a game time decision, Matt. I think, if I can get a free entry comped or something like that, yeah, it would be cool because I don't know if it's the biggest. I'm going to check out the list of exhibitors today to kind of see what's going on there.
Great. We'll hope to have you out there. Maybe we can even do a podcast from Cuarteferias, which is honestly not the best place to do a podcast, but it would be cool to do it since it would be in the conference and trade show spirit.
Definitely. Well, you know what? Listen, I think that I'm definitely pretty bullish on video. I've been playing around with video the last few weeks, and so I'd love to do a little video episode if we can over there. So looking forward to it, my man.
Wow, okay, yeah, video would be a new format, and we could probably have both audio and video version for those that like to follow us on just the audio version of iTunes, but that sounds great,
and maybe,
man.
We will set some Food Startups podcast budget aside for a double if you do not want to show your beautiful face of the show.
Yeah. I'm gonna pay an actor.
That's cool. So what else we got going on this week, Matt?
Well, today we actually have a interview from someone with a very cool type of superfood. This comes from a tree far away that can live over 1,000 years and stores tons and tons of water.
Ooh, it sounds like a really old watermelon. So I'm very excited because watermelon is my favorite fruit. Cool. I'm looking forward to that. And before we get into that, some news, right? We got some news this week. I think one of our previous guests, Circle Up, was in the news. You want to tell the Food Startups fam what's up?
Yeah, so as you guys know, we had Katie on here about a month and a half ago from Circle Up, which is an equity crowdfunding platform, and they help a lot of food startups get funding. They actually launched what I would consider kind of like a mutual fund for those that want to invest in food startups, just called Circle. They just cut up, so it's just Circle. They're about $250,000 average value investments for the fund.
Yeah, and Matt and I were talking about this before because we're trying to figure out if we're going to put some Food Startups podcast budget aside to be in one of the rounds. Is that right?
Yeah, but I don't see it to be too realistic at this point.
Oh, because, that was just a bad joke by Danny over here.
I wish it was true. I would love to be involved.
We were kind of taking a look at the risk profile because basically this is a fund and it's kind of like a closed fund. And Matt and I were talking about, well, is it like a mutual fund or, what kind of thing is it? And I was just commenting on it like, yeah, it's a fund where you might minimize some risk, but also, I don't know about you, Matt, but I've had the wonderful opportunity and also the awful burden of investing in some companies down in Colombia. And you always kind of wonder, are you just giving your money away because there's never like an exit strategy? And so with small companies, you often wonder, well, are they going to be acquired in 4, 5, 10 years? Or maybe you'll never see a return, or, are they going to provide you with some income down the line? It's something to think about, especially with, what Circle is doing. It's very, very interesting. And hats off to them for doing that, though. Really cool.
Yeah, what an amazing concept and what an innovative company.
Definitely. And I got one more piece of news today. So last year in July, I was in New York, and I was up in New York for the Fancy Food Show. And this year was just announced that it will be the biggest Fancy Food Show ever in over 60 years, which really makes you think, what exactly is it about food right now and all these food trends that's making the Fancy Food Show blow up so much?
Right. Well, it's time to bring in our guest. Today, I think we have a really, really informative and amazing guest for our audience.
Yeah, and who is that?
It is Stephan Broburg of Baobab Foods. He's going to tell you a lot more, but Baobab is a fruit that comes from a tree in South Africa, and Baobab Foods Incorporated, they're committed to improving the human condition and well-being of a global society by providing nutritionally advanced Baobab food products. They have fruit cubes, drink mixes, and do all sorts of stuff, and they also help a lot with the suppliers and the women's community in South Africa. Stephan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, fellas. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much. So, I thought I'd start off and ask you a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Baobab?
part of our company started about 4 years ago. We're actually a division of a non-food ingredient company. And one of the people that has worked with the company for probably 12 plus years is from South Africa. And about 5 years ago, Rian and his family moved back to South Africa, and he still works for our company. Part of his job when he went back to South Africa was to start looking around in Africa and to come up with some interesting possible projects, ingredients, whatever it was, that would make sense for the company. So he found Baobab and found that it was being harvested and processed. And that was the beginning of it. So Rian still works for the company. He lives in Cape Town, and he's our day-to-day fixer in terms of making sure things happen, in terms of harvesting and processing and getting things shipped to where they need to go around the world. And so that was the beginning of it. And I was brought in 4 years ago because I'd been very involved with goji berry processing in China. So I knew the space of superfruits and marketing them, and also processing and just the ins and outs of it. So I knew the space. So it took a while. It took about 6 months of just looking at what it was and what we thought we could do with it.
Great. So from the point of, how did you guys get around to defining Baobab at first? Did you look at and do a bunch of different analyses to understand if Baobab has this potential or if it doesn't? What was the process like?
Well, we looked at the nutrients, and it has a freak of nature storyline to it because all the pulp dries naturally in the pod. So if you can envision a maturing Baobab pod is still supple, you can squeeze it like a honeydew melon or a cantaloupe. But as it dries, it gets completely, the pulp dries inside the pod, and the pod now at a fully mature state is as thick as a piece of plywood. So you have to take a machete to chop this thing in half, and then within it are these completely dried chunks of pulp that you can just eat around the seeds. The seeds are mixed in with the pulp. But what we do is separate it from the seeds and mill it and sieve it into a powder. So it's a raw whole food. It has very low moisture. Through that concentration process, you get a very, very high antioxidant level, about 40% more than acai, for example, which is made into a freeze-dried powder. So it's minimally processed. It's 50% fiber. So both the fiber and the antioxidants help lower inflammation in your body. And then it's extremely high in electrolytes, potassium and magnesium, more potassium ounce for ounce than bananas. So it had a nutrient story. Pick another fruit, it may have one or two of these attributes, but if you collect them all up, Baobab has 6 or 7 pretty powerful individual nutrients, but bring them the synergy of them all together, and you've got a pretty interesting powerhouse of a fruit. So we had the nutrient story, and then as we got into it, you start finding out how it's harvested, and you start hearing the story of ethical consumerism, empowering women who do most of the harvesting. So it's become a cash crop. That was another piece to this that was attractive to us, that you could take something that had been eaten for thousands of years, and it was developing into a cash crop that can have an impact. You can buy a bike, build a house, pay school fees, that type of thing, in economies that don't have a lot of cash.
And listeners, you guys can see on the website on foodstarspodcast.com for this episode, we have tons of photos of this very interesting looking tree and the Baobab fruit. So you talked about the nutrient story and how it helps with women's empowerment. Now, Baobab, has it been traditionally used as a food in South Africa for people that live there?
Yeah, it's been eaten for thousands of years. There's Baobab seeds in the pyramids. It was traditionally, you just take a machete, chop it in half, and you just take the chunks and just chew around it, spit out the seeds. It's very high in vitamin C, for example. So anecdotally, over the thousands of years, in an area of the world where there's not citrus growing, you would eat Baobab because the vitamin C would help you not have scurvy. So in terms of keeping your gums and teeth in working condition, that was an important attribute. If you have dysentery, which is something that happens with some regularity in Africa, you're losing all these electrolytes. So your system is in upheaval. Your gut is unhappy. So the fiber and the antioxidants are going to help calm things down. And then the potassium and magnesium are going to replace electrolytes that you may have lost. Nursing mothers eat it. So it's something that is made into a porridge. It's put in water. In modern days, they make popsicles out of it. So it's just commonly been eaten. It's also been mixed with rooibos tea as a beverage for a long, long time.
Let me ask a follow-up. So did you look at the way that Baobab was typically consumed for inspiration towards introducing it to a Western market?
Well, the first part was that it was ultimately processed into a powder, so it was easy to ship. From my perspective, I was in the chocolate business for 15 years where everything's got to be in refrigerated. So you look at a powder and you think, this is easy. You can move this anywhere in the world, and as long as you keep it dry, you're fine. Traditional uses didn't really have too much of an impact on us because Baobab, if you take Baobab powder and mix it in water, it tastes like watered down lemonade. So the beauty of it as an ingredient in creating products is it doesn't have much flavor or color, but it has a big nutrient payload. So it's easy to use. You can put it in drink mixes, bottled juices. You can put it in cereals, granolas, nutrition bars. You can mix it in yogurt, the jam that goes in yogurt. So it's pretty versatile in terms of what you can do with it. So it was more of what are the categories that make sense for it to initially be used. It has so much fiber that it's self-limiting in terms of, let's say, if you're putting it in a juice, you can only use a certain amount of Baobab per serving because you start to feel the fiber on your teeth if there's too high a ratio of Baobab. So you can target things in terms of categories, but ultimately you've got to find the people that have the vision to start using it. With anything new, everyone's excited and interested in it, but everyone looks at you and says, it's going to be the biggest thing ever. I'm just not going to be the first one to do it. But I'll be a second one right behind you. So, it takes a while. You finally get traction, you get people starting to use it, then you get a multiplier effect because then more and more people start to use it, and all of a sudden you've got a trend.
Awesome. Now, Stephan, a follow-up for you. You say it's a dried extract. Is this spray-dried and freeze-dried? I see there's some other ingredients. Can you tell us about the other ingredients in the Baobab fruit powder?
Well, the fruit powder itself there are no other ingredients. It is just, we're taking these chunks, the fruit pulp, when you crack it open, envision something that would be chunks the size of a marshmallow, much firmer because it's totally dry. I mean, it has less than 12% moisture. It's very dry. So you can kind of chip it with if you hold it in your hand, you can kind of use your thumbnail to kind of break it off a little bit. But all we're doing is that's the beauty of it. It's a raw whole food. We are just taking it and separating it from the seeds and milling and sifting it into a powder. So it looks like a freeze-dried extract or powder, but it isn't. It's just what we say is Mother Nature does 98% of the work. All we're doing is we're gathering it and we're processing it and cleaning it, and that's it.
With the drink mix, the drink mix has other ingredients, right?
The drink mix is taking Baobab powder as a base. We're adding evaporated cane juice crystals, and we're adding natural flavor and color and vitamins. But that's just taking those components and mixing it with Baobab. I mean, we do make what's called a depectinized Baobab extract, which is used if you want a clear beverage, because Baobab, if you mix it in water, it will, after 5 minutes, start to fall out of solution a little bit. But if you want a clear beverage that you just drop it in and poof, it's totally absorbed, then we do make an extract, but we sell very little of that. Most people just use the plain powder because it's as you can get it.
Can you define depectinized for for the layman's listener, people that like myself that don't know what that means?
Sure. Baobab is 50% fiber, and most of that is soluble fiber. Pectin is what would fall out of solution is mostly the pectin. Pectin is insoluble fiber, so it is, the type of pectin that's in Baobab couldn't be used for this. But when you make jam or jelly, you use pectin as a thickening agent. So it helps bind things together. So for example, Baobab, if you put it in salad dressing, it's going to keep everything suspended in the salad dressing longer because that's the pectin helping it. So if you take the pectin out, then you're not going to get any cloudiness if you want to have a totally clear juice, for example. So it's just some extra processing. But coming back to the original powder, it looks like a freeze-dried camu powder or acai powder or pomegranate powder that's been freeze-dried and made into an extract or made into an extract. But with this, we haven't done anything to it.
Gotcha. And let me ask you a question. Your team was looking in South Africa perhaps for foods that were marketable, where you could actually maybe transform them in some way that could make money while also helping communities in South Africa. It sounds really difficult with Baobab. Was it? And so I'm trying to understand kind of what the life cycle has been, where you saw Baobab, you saw that it's dehydrated, so it loses a large percentage of its weight. It must cost a lot to, shipping costs wouldn't be super high, but it must cost a lot per mass. And now you have to market this new product in the United States. I mean, for me, because of the fact that I've seen other superfoods and see how difficult it is for people to start becoming aware of them and buying them, it seems like a tremendous task, and especially to do it from South Africa.
Well, part of it is having one of our guys, Rian, living in South Africa. I mean, if you don't have someone on the ground making sure things happen, I mean, you can't do this. So Rian, he's our guy. We talk on Skype every day. Over time, I mean, we've been doing this for a number of years. So now we have much more of an infrastructure in place in terms of how we are getting our raw material from various sources and how we are doing our processing. And then because we market it all over the world, not just here in the United States. Do a combination of getting your infrastructure in place so that you can deliver ever-increasing amounts of Baobab as it's needed, but also you've got to go out and do the PR and the social media and the marketing, both to the consumer level, but also to the R&D and the marketing people so that they understand what this can do.
How do you start marketing this? Who are the partners that you look for? But, who are the first people that you contact and say, hey, we've got this new superfood that really hasn't been imported into the United States before, but it's got tremendous potential?
Well, what we did was we actually developed a consumer snack that's 100% fruit. So we developed a Baobab fruit cube, which is taking Baobab powder and mixing it with fruit purees and concentrates and pectin to make a dried fruit form. So we were able to deliver something that is a recognizable, so people are familiar with it. With Baobab powder, you have to take the powder and do something with it. By creating a product that is a consumer snack, first of all, so you can just eat it by the handful, and it tastes great, plus it's got this nutrients. So, I mean, that's the hook. So you have something that is recognizable. It's like a piece of dried fruit. It tastes better than a lot of dried fruit, and it has a much higher nutrient ingredient statement to it. So that's how you get started with it, because you can eat it as a snack. You can put it in trail mixes, cereals. You can cover it with chocolate. By creating a different way of delivering the nutrients, that was our big push. So, for example, it's now in 7,000 plus CVS stores in the United States.
Definitely. And does it, this is a noob question, but does it compare favorably in terms of pricing per volume as far as like a retail presentation of the fruit cubes? Does it similar to buying dried fruit?
If you're buying dried blueberries, it's in that same price point. If you're buying dried cranberries, it's more expensive. Compare apples to apples. I mean, dried cranberries are mostly after you've squeezed the pulp out to make juice, and it's rehydrated with sugar and sold as a dried fruit, versus something that's got a little bit more on the nutrient side. So blueberries, goji berries in that price range.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're selling as an ingredient as well as a finished product, and you're not just in the U.S. You're all over the world. You've also mentioned that it has it compares very favorably to just about all fruits in terms of its nutrition content, but at the same time, people do want taste. So there's just a lot of things to select for marketing. What sales strategies have you used in the U.S. and other parts of the world, and what have the biggest obstacles been so far?
the initial product that people identify with is the fruit cubes. So that's how we get people started. And then once they've tasted those, they want more of them. And then we can talk about what the powder does on the side, and for both consumers and companies that are then going to use the product. We looked at both the food side and the nutraceutical supplements or protein powders, exercise replenishment types of things, so that we've ended up supplying. So Garden of Life, which is a big brand, for example, uses Baobab in a number of different powder mixes. We have representatives, so we can put things in front of a Fortune 500 food company, or we can put something in front of a startup. And just educating R&D and marketing people at companies for probably 18 months of, here's what this is. It's GFSI audited, which is Global Food Safety Initiative, which if you're selling to a large company, if you don't have that, the conversation stops right there. So we have all the audits. So a big company is comfortable. We wanted to be able to sleep at night. We know what's happening from when it comes off the tree until it gets delivered to the customer, whether it's an ingredient or a finished retail product.
And these sales reps, I would think, I could be wrong here, that you may have them per territory. And do they come to you? Did you have to go out and find them and select them?
Because I've been in the food and wine business for a long time, you kind of collect people that you've worked with. So part of it was that, and part of it is you're out there, you're at trade shows, or you know somebody, you know someone, and all of a sudden you find, a big connection with someone who wants to either use your product in terms of manufacturing something or wants to help you market it to certain customers that they already deal with. A lot of this is just initially finding someone. You can go and target specific categories, but at the end of all this, it's usually someone who finds you and understands it, gets it, and is enthusiastic and wants to do something about it. You've got to have a strategy, but you have to be flexible in terms of getting the information out. Part of it's seeing who finds you.
Stephan, one question on antioxidants. So tell me about how you guys market antioxidants, because I feel as if there's going to be a maturation in the world of how we understand antioxidant quantities, and ORAC is becoming more and more popular. But I see a lot of superfoods these days in supermarkets and online, and they all say, contains antioxidants or high in antioxidants. I want to know what's kind of real, but there don't seem to be too many standards in place.
In certain, let's take juices, for example. Antioxidants by their nature they're fragile to a certain extent, depending on the source of the antioxidants. So vitamin C is, not the most stable vitamin or antioxidant. A lot of this is, we early on decided we were not going to pull any punches and try and take things out of context. So with Baobab, for example, you'll hear, 6 times more vitamin C than oranges. Well, it's based on 100 grams. You'll never eat in a day 100 grams of Baobab. You may eat 20 or 30 grams of Baobab, but you're not going to eat 100. So it's not a fair comparison, apples to apples, if you will.
Okay.
So with the antioxidants, what we've done is we've tested the antioxidant levels, and we've also tested the bioavailability of the antioxidants. For example, acai freeze-dried powder has very low bioavailability for the antioxidants. So on a scale of 0 to 400, it's maybe 15. And Baobab is about 260 on this scale. So if you look at pomegranate or camu or grapeseed extract, all these things have various big antioxidant numbers, but your body doesn't really absorb too much. So that's part of it. Part of it is just having the hard, cold facts on the thing. And part of it is just not taking it out of context. So we talk about our numbers. A lot of retail products will say high in antioxidants, but they're never going to tell you what it is because either they don't know or it's actually pretty low. So we try and be as transparent as possible. Here are the numbers. Here's the lab report. We're not taking it and putting it on our letterhead. Here's the letterhead from the lab. Let's talk from there. And also part of it is within the context. Antioxidants and fiber in Baobab are working together to help intestinal health. 70% of your immune system is in your gut. So if you can help keep things calm, then the better off you are. So that's part of our message, without getting into too many details with eyes, glazing over for people.
Definitely.
Thanks for that explanation. I think that's going to be really helpful. But, I guess I found this for a lot of different types of superfoods. What you just explained to us and kind of how you compared it to acai is very hard to do on a package, and there's a high percentage of people that are okay with, high in antioxidants. That's enough for them, whether or not it has refined sugar and stuff. And I know you mentioned that you're not trying to be in every single store. In the end, it's always it's cool how you mentioned that you try to find people that are enthusiastic, people that get your product, because on a package it's really hard to explain everything you just told us when you only have a few square inches of space.
Well, what we talk about is, in one of our customers, Bonga Foods, Bonga Foods, Bonga Foods, they've done a great job of explaining in broad strokes the halo effect of Baobab, as they call it, the sub-Saharan superfruit, that has antioxidants and fiber and electrolytes. And it's just broad strokes. It's not getting into the nitty-gritty. We get in more into the details with a company that's making something, because that's the nature of the beast. That's what they want to know to then decide how they're going to use it. But as a consumer product, it's more of African superfruit. And if you want to get into the details more, then the details get supplied at various places, websites, and other material.
So, Stephan, what's next for Baobab Foods? Are you guys going to continue to expand and educate in Baobab-focused products? Are you going to look at other superfoods and look at how to complement the product line you have now?
We're certainly expanding with Baobab into, we're doing a lot down in Australia. We're starting to do more and more in China. We're pushing ahead with Baobab, both the fruit cubes and the powder. Southern Africa has 30,000 different indigenous plants. So there's some very interesting plant extracts and powders. So we are starting to bring to market this year, and really more full-fledged next year, Baobab oil from the seeds. The oils are used in a lot of hair care and skincare products. Marula oil, M-A-R-U-L-A, which is a developing oil that is used, again, in a lot of skincare. It will be used in more skincare. It's been an issue of not being able to process it correctly in large enough quantities. So a lot of people want it, but there's not enough high-quality oil out there. So we're getting very involved in that. And some other plant extracts, some things that work well with Baobab. It's the synergy of using them in the powders and in different formulas. So the main focus still is Baobab, but we're adding 3 or 4 different other, whether they're ingredients, plant extracts, or oils.
It makes total sense to me. If you're developing competencies and logistics in one region of the world, to be able to take advantage of that, as long as these new products that you're introducing are consistent with the mission that you have as a company. I think that's really cool. And one more follow-up, if you may. So can you tell me a little bit just about the type of relationships you have with the farmers? I'm just interested because it looks like Baobab is almost harvested like a wild macadamia nut is harvested, or like the Brazil nut is harvested. And I'm just curious as to what kind of relationships you have to develop with what kind of decision makers, and how the supply chain works.
Well, they are envision vast forests of Baobab trees, so it's more of training people and getting them out in. It's not one of these things where someone owns Baobab trees. Communities, it's more of a community group ownership of the trees in your community's land. So you're either using people that are involved in those communities, or you've developed a relationship with them and you are allowed to harvest their trees, as long as everyone is making some money along the transaction here. So, now it's become one of these things where one of our groups, you apply once a year to get trained, and there's a list that people want to get trained because they can see that there's good opportunities there. So it's continues to develop and evolve, but we basically work with groups in three different countries. So it's really more of infrastructure, of getting out huge distances out to get this fruit and then to bring it into a more central location. Baobab trees, it takes 75 to 100 years for an adolescent tree to even begin bearing fruit. So most of these trees are 300 to 500 years old. Many of them are over 1,000 years old. We also are involved with teaching sustainable forestry practices so that trees are treated a certain way. Before it was, you could cut down your baobab tree and sell it for biomass one time to make plywood. But now you have an annuity that you can expand and create value every year. Some other type of plant or fruit.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I would love to, kudos to you guys. I'd love to see more Baobab in all stores myself, because if it tastes like lemonade, if it has the antioxidants, and if it has such a good return for its cultivators, a social return too, it's incredible. And it's also one of the most interesting looking trees I've ever seen.
Well, that's the tree of life. It's the bark doesn't burn, so it's not you can't burn it down. It stores thousands of gallons during a drought. Fruit has this incredible nutrient value. Just about every component has some part of your life.
Oh. Well, Stephan, thanks so much for coming on today. I would like to make an open invitation today. When you have one of your other products developed and launched sometime later this year or next year, we'd love to have you on again. I am pretty sure that everyone that listened to this learned quite a bit.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone.
Absolutely.
And we'll certainly keep in touch.
And don't be a stranger to South America, okay? There's definitely some good stuff here for you guys to check out.
Believe me, my passport's always operational, so it's on my list for the next 12 to 24 months to head south, so it can happen.
Thanks so much for listening, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.